Welcome to the 2014 National Teachers Hall of Fame Roundtable discussion. I am Keith Geiger, member of the Board of Trustees of the National Teachers Hall of Fame, and I will be moderating this roundtable discussion. And as you will see today, we have a great group of inductees this year. One of the prerequisites of being a candidate to the National Teachers Hall of Fame is 20 years of classroom teaching experience. And so we have a wealth of knowledge, dedication, and experience. So let's jump to the first question, and I've combined a couple of our questions in the first one. I'm going to ask first that you introduce yourself, you tell us why you went into teaching, but more importantly, tell us why you stayed in teaching. And I'm going to start with Jan.
I'm Jan Alderson. This will be my 45th year of teaching science. I have taught now 14 years in Shawnee Mission School District in Kansas. I taught 31 years in Raytown, Missouri. I pursued a career in teaching because I come from a long line of teachers and people in service, mayors, ministers, so I just think it's kind of my family genome. I've stayed in teaching because teaching science is just a lot of fun. Just to see the kids succeed and enjoy science, it doesn't get better than that. I just thoroughly have enjoyed it. Did I miss a part of the question?
Why you went into teaching and why you stay in teaching, why you stayed in.
I stay in teaching, again, the creativity process. I went into it, again, from a family history. I just feel like we live to serve.
Cindy?
I'm Cindy Couchman. I teach high school math at Bueller High School in Kansas. I look back, I call myself the accidental teacher because I didn't, like Jan and many of the people up here know from an early age I was going to be a teacher. I think I changed my major. I don't know, I should go back and look, but I think it's unofficially maybe 6 to 8 times. And I started off, engineering and business, and I just made the rounds, and I finally looked at my loans and said, okay, I've got to get a degree. And so I remember going to my counselor and laying it all out in front of him and saying, what's the fastest track to a job? And started off with mathematics, and I went and sort of did some observations of some actuarians, and it's like, that's not for me. What's my second choice? And he said, what about teaching? And I was like, all right, let's go. And so I'm kind of an accidental teacher, kind of backed into it. But I do believe that there are just I think people bloom where they're planted. And I think that sometimes when I look at the people out here in this group, that probably, I think you would have bloomed. They're the kind of people that would have excelled and succeeded no matter what they chose. But thankfully for education for our students, these people have chosen education. So that's sort of how I got into education. I do remember my high school math teacher always being so much fun and loved him, and I think that that's originally why I was so passionate about mathematics. Had a great sense of humor, and I just remember thinking, God, that's a lot of he's having fun, like he loves his job. Why I stay in it, it's pretty easy. Once you experience teaching, I've had, the kids they give so much energy. You can come to school and be like down here if something's happened, but you walk in the door and meet your kids and it's gone. You just get so much energy from them, and I think they keep you young. They keep you always challenged. You never have the same issue more than one day in a row, sometimes even from minute to minute. So it's always kind of always challenging. It's always changing. Like Jan said, the creativity piece is kind of nice. I think I might be a little ADHD, so it fits right into my inability to, I think I'm truthfully a 16-year-old at heart. Sometimes my sense of humor is there too. So I think, it keeps you young. I'm really like 120, and I age well. So that's kind of why, I guess the students is why I stayed in.
And Cindy is a former math teacher who went into teaching because of his math teacher himself.
Yeah, I do.
Marguerite?
Hi, I'm Marguerite Izzo, and I've taught every grade from kindergarten through 12th grade. I also teach college. At night I teach pre-service teachers. I taught social studies on the high school and junior high school level, and I currently teach 5th grade, English Language Arts and Social Studies in the Malvern School District on Long Island, which is the most beautiful place in the world to live, next to Kansas. I went into teaching because I was a teacher from the time I was born. I have 5 siblings, and they would tell you that teaching's part of me. It's in my DNA. I know I'm a teacher in every cell of my body. There was never a choice for me. I tried doing other things, and I always came back to teaching. I love it. And the reason that I stay in it is because it is the most challenging job in the world. To get 30 students to want to learn, to master the material that you've presented to them, requires you to form a relationship with them every single day. Otherwise, they're not really going to integrate that information. I don't know any other profession. Doctors and lawyers see people one at a time. That's a piece of cake. This is a challenge, and it's the most important work in the world. There's nothing more important than educating our citizenry. So I kind of feel sorry for anybody who isn't a teacher.
And a fellow Michigander, Gary.
I'm Gary Koppelman from Blissville, Michigan. I guess the reason I'm in teaching is because I caught what my mother's heart was set on. And kids, they do have a tendency to catch what their parents' heart is set on, and they'll go after it. Parents can tell them, well, you need to do this, but if parents aren't doing those things, kids have a hard time to follow. But my mom was an elementary school teacher for 42 years, and she loved kids, and I caught that. And so it's kind of exciting. And I am just finishing my 41st year in teaching, and I have taught everything from kindergarten through 8th grade, and presently I'm teaching science and math and writing at Blissfield. My passion, I guess, to touch kids' hearts is being released in the small rural farming community of Blissfield, to touch that learning palette of kids, and to make that they would make an impact in the community in which they live. And that really excites me, to see kids, when they graduate, go on to accomplish things that maybe in 5th grade they just dreamed of, and I see it being accomplished. I guess just giving and inspiring kids and children with resources, academic tools, to accomplish and fulfill their life's passion and what they were created to do is an integral part of my responsibility, and I just take great joy in it. That sparkle in the eye when a child learns or grasps it for the first time, it just propels me to go further and to share the things that I've learned in various ways. And I guess that sparkle in the eye is what keeps me in education, reaching the child's learning palette.
And my friend Becky.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Keith. My name is Dr. Rebecca Palacios. I am a retired dual-language pre-kindergarten teacher. I taught in the early childhood grade levels for 34 years in the Corpus Christi Independent School District in Corpus Christi, Texas. And throughout my career, I always felt a calling to teach young children. It was just something I always felt like I needed to do. I'm a first-generation college graduate, and so I watched my teachers and their motivation and their excitement about being in the classroom and teaching. So even from an early age, I was watching their strategies and looking at the ways that they taught and the things that they did correctly, but also the things that they did incorrectly. So I kind of thought about those things as I was going through my own career, my own schooling. And so after I graduated and realized that this is my dream, I'm here in the classroom, this is where I want to be, I felt like I wanted to stay. And at the beginning, it was all about the children, and still was all those 34 years. But then I realized, as I matured and became a veteran teacher, realized that the other part and the other hub to that was that we need to mentor and model for those incoming novice teachers. So I felt that second step to stay in the classroom, to be that bridge between the school and the university preparation program, to be able to be there as a career teacher and say, look, I'm working with little children, I'm working with Those are very important. I'm working with the community, but most importantly, I'm working with the next generation of teachers, because that's who motivate our next generation of learners. So that was my sincere effort to bring all that hub together to make it real and meaningful for our next generation.
Now, I got messed up a little bit. I had all of these signs turned so that the camera could see it, but I could see them. And they were turned back, so just the camera can see them. So I had to write the names down here, so I hope I don't get messed up, because I'm gonna move around as we ask the next questions. Gary, you're the only one that I know for sure I won't call. That was the wrong name. I'm gonna go to the second question, which is just gonna tie onto this first one. All the reports that come out say that about 50% of teachers leave the teaching profession within their first 5 years of teaching. I'd like to ask the panelists if you have any insight as to why that is happening, and secondly, what are some of the things we ought to do to keep that from happening? And Becky, I'm going to start with you on this one.
And I think I had a really good segue into that, because that's what I saw. I was one of the great experiences that I had was being one of the founders of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, along with many of my colleagues around the country. And that was one of the research pieces that stood out the most, was that we were losing our novice teachers, our beginning teachers, at an alarming rate within the first 3 to 5 years of their teaching years, their profession. And so that's why I felt that second bridge was going to be very, very important in staying in the classroom, being a clinical teacher, and explaining to those teachers why this is important. So what we need to focus on is that mentoring piece. We allow them to sink or swim. We're so busy, wrapped up in closing the door and doing things with our own little students, or in my case, my own little students, but older students. And so we're so wrapped up in that, which is important. But that next step is that if we are, the teachers that we claim to be, accomplished teachers who can really explain the practice of why we're doing what we're doing and really reflecting on it, that's what we need to do to be able to bridge it to other teachers. So if we can mentor them, help them out their first year when they're in our pre-service observation mode, and then later on as they become certified teachers, that we're there to bridge them in that first year, and then follow them through with help and development within the first 3. So I look back at my first 3 years of teaching, and the first year was just like, what am I doing? Let me get this right. Please don't let me harm any children. And the second part was, okay, I'm getting it. Now I'm gonna get this curriculum all set up. I'm matching the needs of the kids to this part that I'm teaching. And the third year was really getting organized. So it took me 3 years just to get there, but I could not have done it without the support of my principal, who was wonderful, and all the other teachers in my building who rallied around me as a beginning teacher. And so that's the piece, I think, that's really important, that we help them from the very beginning all the way through, and even when they need it later on.
Gary?
I think the answer is sometimes simple, because sometimes they will never reach the salary level that compensates for their educational experience. That professional development, the salary will never be there. And the educational experience and the things that they need to go through to reach a level to support a family, or to obtain the things that they would like to do with their family and living in a community. And so the salary level makes an impact. I also feel that their teachers are not highly regarded as others in the community of making an impact on the next generation. Sometimes whether politicians or general public, they don't feel or regard the profession to be compensated and accordingly. My son Brock came to me just 2 weeks ago after finishing his student teaching, and he said, "Dad, what's it going to be like 5 years from now? I'm looking at the salary scale." He said, "Dad, you encouraged me to go into education." And he said, "I could make a lot more money being a bioengineer." And, it just kind of took me back. But, when he started his first year as a freshman, that's the direction it was going, and he caught what this dad's heart was set on, and that was to touch kids' hearts and lives. And I have a feeling that's exactly where he's going to be, but he has that question in his mind, will I be able to raise a family and to care for my family in the way in which you have, Dad? And so I see the compensations for teachers as being lowered. There was just a recent survey recently that what is the lowest paying salary of a college degree? And it was really interesting that it was in the educational profession was on the bottom. And that just kind of rings inside of me. Well, if we're preparing the next generation for all the jobs that they do, they should be compensated for with what they're doing. I know that I didn't get into education for the finances, and I'm not going to get rich doing it, but we do need to compensate our kids that are coming into the teaching profession in a higher fashion.
Marguerite?
I completely understand what Rebecca and Gary have just said. So we don't support our beginning teachers as much as we should. And certainly the salaries are not commensurate with the amount of work that we do and the importance of this work. We didn't sign up for missionary work here. Teaching is supposed to be a profession. So what I think is very encouraging is that this administration is dealing with some of these issues in terms of supporting teachers and in terms of the salary. The Respect Project from 2 years ago, I think it's 2 years ago, and the Teach to Lead initiative that the Secretary just talked about recently will address some of this. I think the crux of it is that these generation, what letter are we up to, X, Y, Z? I don't even know anymore. But one of the things that they really care about is collaboration with their colleagues, and they want to be creative. And we're not allowing that in the structure that schools exist in today. So we need to blow off the doors. We just need to open up our doors, and everybody's got to share. The other thing is that we have to have some sort of career ladder in teaching, which is something that the National Network of State Teachers of the Year is really passionate about. Having teachers assume different roles within education and compensating them for those roles. I think this is on the cusp. I think it's coming really soon, and it's going to really change education in America. We're going to look at Finland and Singapore and Canada and see what they do well. We're going to be able to replicate it in some instances here in America. That's what's happening.
Cindy?
Yeah, I kind of want to say ditto. These are great minds here. I do think the financial issue is something that needs to be addressed. I think one way you can start doing that is we need to start there's a little bit of a public attack on education right now. I think we're going to, as educators, are going to have to start advocating for our profession much more publicly than we've ever done before. I think that means getting involved, and we consider ourselves a service profession, and we have a hard time really advocating for ourselves sometimes because we want to serve others rather than really promote ourselves. And so I think we're going to start thinking more of advocacy of our profession to change that. I think the other is exactly what Marguerite touched on, is this group of teachers that are coming into our profession, they are used to working together. And there's that quote that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's how they want to go, is they want to collaborate. Professional learning communities we have to train our teachers, our knowledgeable teachers in professional learning communities. We need to create an environment of trust and reflection and growth in those first 3 years. I would love to look at not taking the first year teacher and putting them with 3 sports and cheerleading sponsor the lower level classes, but like helping them, guide them in. Don't give them such a full load at the beginning. Let them sort of get their feet wet. An internship, sort of a process where you paid them, and worked through them those first 2 years instead of just, go and swim. I think we need to look at hybrid roles for teacher leadership. I think that Teach to Lead program is going to be, I think that's really going to give some opportunities. When you look at, if I wanted to increase my salary as an educator, I have to leave the classroom. And that's such a shame. I have pretty much topped out. And so for me to get a raise, I have to leave the classroom. There's something wrong with that. Like, okay, we know that you're a great teacher, we want you to stay, but to get this money, you're gonna have to leave. And there's gotta be some sort of hybrid role between a teacher and a leader. There's gotta be some teacher leadership roles there. I think it is coming, and I think the more teachers that we get in there expecting that, I think that it will push us that have been around for a while to really embrace that. Becky talked about the mentoring and really helping as, taking student teachers in. I would love to see us kind of redefine that. We pay to go and learn how to student teach. You pay that semester, that year. I would like to see that first year sort of as an internship, and where they're paid, but yet they're partnered with a teacher, and have that more of a transition year, and where they're getting a salary to work with an experienced teacher, and then give them a half-time schedule kind of on their own, a half-time with an experienced teacher, and then the second year give them more on their own. And I think that support system will give them more confidence, like that collaboration piece that Marguerite talked about.
Jan?
Excellent points have been made. They say the three major reasons why teachers don't stay in are workload, respect, and salary. And I remember when I began teaching 45 years ago, half my loans were paid because there was a teacher shortage. If you promised to teach for 10 years, then you'd only had to pay back half your loans of $1,500. And that included room and board. And I did. So I'm seeing now a decrease in numbers who are going into education programs. I could give 2 examples because most excellent points have been made using two people. 2 teachers who are absolutely outstanding. This is in the Hannibal LaGrange area. And they taught for 1 year. One of them taught in a rural area. She was an excellent teacher, but the workload really bogged her down. And she was able to get, to go through it, do a great job. She just couldn't see herself, like your son, in 5 years. She wants to start a family. How could she coach these things and all this paperwork? How could she juggle all this? The emotional toll it takes from you physically and emotionally when you come home at night. So she's now pursuing her degree in physical therapy. The other one, who had just a real passion, she taught in a large school in the northeast part of Missouri, and she felt it was a lack of respect. She didn't feel like she had administrative support. The students didn't respond when she taught science as she thought they would. So the respect part was really what really disappointed her. She's now going to pursue a different career. So, the salary, yes, is another issue, but another thing that has not been brought up is empowerment. I think that's a part of respect. Your teachers, instead of using your training and your creativity and innovation, are often lockstepped on a daily basis in their subject matter. They don't have much control over, I think this is why core competencies has received quite a negative response in many areas, because I don't think teachers feel like they really have the empowerment to impact what they're supposed, what they're going to be teaching. So I think I've been very lucky. I had excellent administrators, which is a very important aspect of why I think I stayed into teaching. If they don't support you, don't empower you, I would go into my principal, I suggest something that I'd like to do. He would go, okay, we'll try it. If it doesn't work, and eventually he actually turned around and he started doing field trips and so forth. So as long as they would just let you try something, it's just huge. So empowerment, I think, is a real important point to be made too.
I have a set pattern I was going to ask these questions, but fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you answer a previous one, I skipped. So now I'm going way down to another question because I want this one to key off some of the answers you gave on the last one. Do you believe student test scores should be a factor in teacher evaluations and/or considerations for salary increments? And in your opinion, what factors should be taken into consideration for annual teacher evaluations? And Marguerite, in light of your answer on the previous one, I'm going to start with you.
I think that's a great question, Keith, and I think that it's one that many of us wrestle with. I don't know a teacher who doesn't embrace accountability, and I reject the notion that teachers don't want to have their performance evaluated. However, a single day's test, a 3-hour test for one of my students, accounts for 20% of my annual performance review. That child could have faced any number of horrible scenarios that morning or the night before. We as teachers are accountable for having our children master content. We are accountable for our children becoming lovers of learning. We are accountable for making creative and critical thinkers for the growth of this country. But value-added measures have proven to be unreliable, and I'm not great in statistics, but I think that that's one of the tenets that is non-negotiable when you're using a measurement. So I get fired up when the teacher down the hall from me comes to me crying 2 days ago, because this teacher who taught me how to teach children how to read is in fear of being labeled developing because her students didn't reach a certain benchmark on a value-added measure this year. This is the most gifted teacher I've ever been with, and she's struggling because of this one part of her evaluation. It's criminal. What we're doing to teachers now is criminal. You can't roll out this many changes to an educational system as we've done in this country in the past few years. Systems aren't made to absorb this many changes. So in answer to your question, teachers must be responsible for their children mastering this content area knowledge, whatever it is. But there has to be the multiple measures taken into account when you're evaluating how a teacher does in a classroom.
Becky?
Well, I look at it from a different perspective. I look at it from that early childhood, perspective, because when we look at children and their evaluations, and I was the foundation for what was going to happen later on. And so with me, having children being evaluated, which, we had these oral language measures, it's a little bit different from those, high-risk tests that kids take later on. But I could give the child a question at the very beginning and they break down crying. Great. My whole evaluation is based on 0 because this child cried throughout this measure. When they're 3 and 4-year-olds, I'm a stranger, who knows, So I think about it that way, what social and human growth and development means to children and what it means to them in the application of one snapshot, like Marguerite said, of their life. So I think we have yet, as a teaching profession and as a school system, have yet to come up with a wonderful blend of ways that we can combine the best practice of what the research tells us is important in the way that children learn. So it's not just about a snapshot. We know that it's about their learning over time, and we have not figured out a way to do that well. So what we need to do is take a think tank of people who are proficient and understand the research and the social emotional impact, as well as the cognitive and learning impact, and bring a panel of people to really think about ways that we can do this as a country and do it well. The countries have done it, and we just haven't stepped up to that plate. And I think I want to take it from this perspective. As an early childhood teacher, I challenge our teaching professional community to come together in a very sound way to come up with a wonderful measure that we can look at it that bridges this over time, because this debate can go on forever. And we know it doesn't work in many places. And if we're losing teachers, as we talked about previously, at a high rate, and we're asking our new and our best and our brightest to come into the teaching profession, what do we have to offer? Punitive results, punitive measures? That's not the way to attract the best and the brightest for our next generation of learners. We don't even know. I mean, as a pre-K teacher, I always ask myself, what am I teaching these children? And where are we going to be in 15, 20, 30, 40 years when they're going to need these skills? And I mean, before, I could pick up my smartphone. We didn't do any of this where it was at our fingertips. Our kids didn't, have that access, but now they do, and they need it. So I don't even know right now, if I was to step in a 3-year-old classroom, what these kids are going to be like, 30 years down the road. But it all measures their learning. It's about that, and I think we need to do that as a profession. So I don't have a clear answer because I don't think our country has a clear answer.
Gary?
I think evaluation of teachers, it's one factor is our test scores. That's just one way to evaluate a teacher. But however, it is just one factor. I can walk into my school, my colleagues' room, and I know that they're doing an outstanding job. I know that how they're touching kids' lives. In a standardized test, it's only one way to measure. And test scores and that evaluation of a teacher, the factors of what happened the night before. I had a student this past year that was there was some domestic violence that was taking place, and she was not proficient. Does that reflect myself, or does that reflect the family or the community that involvement that she was in? The teacher's role is to come alongside, I think, parents to help them in the training up of their child, who the parent is with that child over a course of time. I'm with that child for 9 months of the year, or for just 1 year, and to look at that evaluation of myself. And I know that sometimes in our state we are evaluating our students in the fall, so they had the summer off. How does that really reflect? I had students that in the fall, I had 6 students that were proficient, or highly proficient. This spring we gave a STAR test, and I had 16. What was the difference? It was basically myself being with that child at the end of the year, the child being tested underneath my supervision. The teacher's role to support the parent and the community coming behind me. The abandonment of time spent with a child and a continuation is very important for that family unit to continue to be strengthened. And my responsibility as a teacher is to come along and see that family be imparted with various things. The tools needed, it's very important that I support the parent and the parent supports me, and that there is a working together of parent and teacher to make it successful for that child. There are various things that a teacher is doing that I know is making impact with that child, and it's more than just a test score. It is how they care for and relate with other students, how they relate to and support adults. There are other things besides just a test score that we are moving in a direction that test scores are validating, and is that test really evaluating the whole human being?
Jan?
Well, think about this. I teach honors biology. There are 38 chapters in the textbook, 1,500 terms, and each chapter has many sub-concepts, and they select 30 questions. And those 30 questions, the students in Kansas, there is no leverage. They, if they do well or not, it has no impact on student graduation requirements, even given there may be an exam grade for this outcome. You can't even commend a student if they do really well. So you have this academic piece that is a challenge for a teacher. The non-academic, John Poggio of Kansas, who heads the assessment part of Kansas, and he's a real expert. He said before the legislature this year, the education committee, that the most accurate predictor of student success in college, 80% of our students attend college, go to college, but only 40% finish. And the greatest predictor is not a test. It is instead, do they have grit, perseverance? Are they organized? Do they have the attitude to finish? And all these non-academic parts of success. And in the jobs, the grit component is, just really, really important to their success. So high stakes testing, he said that the thing we do right in Kansas is we don't make high stakes decisions based on tests in this state. So I think there's a lot of questions about the validity of testing, over testing. I think we all agree testing, assessment is very important, but are we on the extreme side right now?
Cindy?
Wow, this has kind of been my passion lately, is assessments and looking at what role they play. I think that it's interesting that we've tied assessments because we do have a responsibility. Kids only get one chance at first grade, and they only get one chance at algebra, and they only get one chance at 7th grade. And so it is important. We have a responsibility to teach these students at a high level, and all good teachers know this. And somehow, we have this assessment to our content. And that is assuming that that's the only thing we're teaching students is this content. I teach a whole lot more than mathematics, and I can guarantee you that Marguerite and Gary, all these people, they teach more than their content. They're teaching kids how to persevere. Those are hard things to measure. And when you take a look at teacher evaluations, we're not even real clear and have a real clear definition of what is teacher effectiveness, what is student engagement. If you ask people to define teacher effectiveness and student engagement, you would get very different definitions. But yet we're pulling all of those things together along with content. And I'm telling you what, there is not that accountability, responsibility that Jan said about the student taking the test. And there's not one student that you go to that is making a positive world change that goes, oh my gosh, you know what did it for me? That 8th grade math assessment. I'll tell you what, that was my moment in life where I had a clarity. That was my life-changing moment. That's not what students say. So students are not bought into these assessments. There's no immediate feedback. We gave them in April. I have no idea how we did on them. I mean, if you're going to give an assessment, you should get feedback to change your instruction. Isn't that the purpose of an assessment, is to change and reflect on your instruction? We don't even use them for that right now because we haven't even seen our results yet. So there's so many issues to tie with that, and then you're going to tie it to my salary. That's a tough pill to swallow. I would like to see us instead look and tie, if I wanted to tie something to my students' performance, then what I would like to do is do an individualized learning plan for each one of my students and say, what is your passion? Is your passion art? Let's see growth in art. Is your passion mathematics? Let's create a portfolio and show you growth in mathematics. I would like to see something like that rather than based on one test, but growth over a course of a year, something they're passionate about. Let them choose what they want to learn about. Let's cultivate their dreams and hopes and not just say content is the only thing we teach, because I don't think that that's the only thing we teach, nor do I think it's the most important.
Well, let's see if we can find a question and that'll get you people excited. Tell me what your feelings are about the Common Core standards, and do you believe this will increase student learning? Becky?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that, coming together as a nation and understanding about Common Core, and first I have to do a little disclaimer, I'm from Texas, so we don't have Common Core. But Common Core, I use it in my role as a senior curriculum advisor for abcmouse.com. We know that it's important to understand what children need to learn. We have a highly mobile society, so Common Core standards are great. They're important in the way that we integrate them into the fabric of teaching. But I think that one of the most difficult parts of it, it'll increase student learning, but I think one of the barriers has been, and just because I've talked to teachers and I've worked with families a lot, it's part of my role, is that the families don't understand it. And I think that's been the biggest barrier for teachers trying to really promote Common Core, is that the language in which it's written is very difficult for parents to discern. What does this mean? How do I do this? How do I help at home? So like, Gary talked about, the families are very important. We all recognize that we only have them for X amount of time, but that Common Core has to be not just in school, but at home. They're helping and supporting with their homework and so forth. So to be able to do that, we have to make it understandable. I think we need to take that step, but definitely, coming together, and this has been, like I said, my first 3 years of teaching were all just learning years. Well, that's where we are, I think, with Common Core. It's going to take these little steps of working with it, and that's one of the things that we can't take away. And that's one of the things that happens in education. We start this program, we do it 1 or 2 years, and it's gone. And we try something else, and then we get a new principal or a new superintendent, and that's gone, and we try something else. And there's the lack of consistency is a detriment to teaching. And we need to make sure that we are consistent with Common Core, that we articulate it well, that we include special populations in it, special education children, English language learners, because those are the populations that we want to make sure receive the best of the best. Then we can only do that by working and bridging those Common Core and understanding what they truly mean, and having teachers unpack those standards and come together and collaborate. This is what we can think about. This is what we can do for this particular K-1 standard in literacy. So what can we do? And working all that together over time is going to make the biggest change.
Jan?
Well, I think most highly effective teachers do what the Common Core is asking you to do anyway. You integrate, you develop the skills, the performance-based kinds of things. This is my 6th kind of state testing that I've been involved with since I started teaching. So as you were saying, it keeps changing. That's what teachers are saying. What's next? So I do think that if teachers have more input just on the local levels of what is good for their students, like what is your passion? What do we need to do for this group of students? And it'll change year by year. When we test, we assume that all kids are exactly the same. Just about, you're testing the same way for all kids, all types of learners. And that's not effective. So there's just a lot of things. I think, again, Common Core is something we all do anyway. It's just a matter of, we need to look at some of these secondary things that impact the Common Core. Kansas, it's college and career ready. In Missouri now, they are not going to establish a Common Core. They're going to use something else. And you said Texas as well. So it's a good question.
Cindy?
Well, Common Core standards I think are great. I mean, people get confused, I think, with the standards, what versus instruction versus assessment. They think it's all the same thing. And when I often talk to people, a Common Core is simply standards. And if you take a look at the Common Core standards in mathematics specifically, math hasn't changed a ton over the years. They've rearranged it. They've kind of put different things. They've made them more specific. The Common Core standards have. They've pushed things down grade level wise, but there is nothing in the Common Core standards that you can select and say, oh my gosh, where did that come from? I mean, linear algebra is still linear algebra and geometry is still geometry. I mean, they are still pretty much the thing. That is our Common Core standards. What I love about it is we are such a mobile society anymore. We have, when you think of some of our lower SES students, they're very mobile. I think of our military people, they're very mobile, moving from state to state. Having Common Core standards, it helps the students when they are mobile and they're moving from one school to another. I think that piece is very important for Common Core standards. So there's the standards, and I think the standards are good. They're difficult, but we confuse that with instructional practice. And instructional practice is a recommendation in the Common Core. Now, it doesn't say how you teach it, but we are trying to make more open-ended questions. We are trying to delve deeper into problem solving because of the Common Core, the way the standards are stated. And then there's the assessment piece. And I think people get Common Core all together into the same thing and think it's all the same thing. But the standards themselves are written very well. NCTM has supported them. You know, this is not a federal government. It was produced by the National Governors Association and Cisco. And, I mean, this was a movement, not from the federal government. And people want to tie all that in together. So I think that we need to come to an understanding of what they are. I do think it will help promote learning. I do. I think it's raised the bar nationally. And if nothing else, it has gotten the talk of education in front of legislators and in front of parents and in front of students. And it's pushed education to the forefront of our topic.
Marguerite?
We don't change the rules for basketball from state to state, but we change the standards in this country from state to state. To Cindy's point, I have children who come into my classroom in the middle of March, and if they're coming from another state which had different standards, I had to address that for many, many years in my career. I had to fill the gaps in their learning very often because New York State did have, I thought, very rigorous standards. The thing that I find so curious is why teachers aren't more engaged when these policy decisions are being made. So if we had teachers at the table with policymakers and politicians and all the people who are creating these decisions for the teachers who have to implement them, I think that you wouldn't have seen half of this, and I really mean 50% of this uproar, because teachers would have talked about how long it takes to roll out a change like this. Systems cannot absorb this much change at once, and that's why, to your point, the Common Core is being linked to teacher evaluation. It's being linked to the state testing. If we don't disengage it, we're going to lose the baby with the bathwater, and that would be tragic. When I first started teaching, I had a really, really, really tough cooperating teacher. Oh, I was scared of her. My first teacher, I'll tell you the story. So the first day I was teaching, she let me have the classroom finally. I was waiting 6 weeks, for goodness sake, and when I was done, she said, you know, sister, that part-time job you have at Saks, maybe you should make that full-time. And I cried all the way home. And then I grew up. And I realized she's right. My lesson wasn't teaching critical thinking skills. It wasn't teaching what we now call close reading. It was superficial. And I thank God for her leadership every single day. That's what we need in teaching, is people who are going to hold us all to that kind of a higher standards. I think that the Common Core state standards bring me back to when I began teaching. And I think that's a very, very good thing. We had a great experience this year in 5th grade. We had to read Esperanza Rising, which is a challenging book for 5th graders. And we had to tie that to the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. I didn't really think we were going to be all that successful until I was teaching something very different. I don't even remember the novel, but little Antoine raises his hand and says, you know, Mrs. Izzo, her human rights aren't being upheld. They're being violated in this chapter in this story. And I thought, this is what teachers live for. He understands human rights now. I couldn't have asked for a better lesson. I couldn't have asked for better standards.
Gary?
I think the Common Core standards, they're inside the teacher. I really believe that they're there. And the thing that and they're very important. That's why we're teaching. And it's important to have them. The thing that I see is just a lack of implementing the right side brain hemisphere and approaches to the Common Core. And the whole educational process, we try to take and we say, all these kids are going to do it this way. And this is the way that's going to be, and it's this tier type of learning. And for myself, it didn't make sense. And I totally approach the curriculum in a different way. And it's that from the right side of being creative and creative solutions to our problems. We got to be thinking differently, and instead of getting all the kids to think this way, and I think that's where the creativity of the teacher and those Common Core standards to get Johnny and Billy and Susie to understand it has to be taught differently, and it's got to be taught creatively. The creative solutions are going to come to those educational problems when we release the right hemisphere brain teachers to be approaching it in a different way. An example is STEM, or excuse me, STEAM. That's what I would like to call it, instead of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I'd like to see arts to be part of that, so that we are teaching creativity, but the first thing that comes out of a school program is the arts, whether it be music, art, the whole creative side. And I think it's very important that in the Common Core standards, we have to approach it with a creativity, and I want to make sure that that freedom and that ability to approach Common Core is also in a creative way. And with that, that's where art and music and those things need to be released as well.
If this taping is too long for any one setting, the response to that question should be publicly made to every teacher in the United States, to every college of education class, and to all of the politicians. That was a powerful answer from 5 separate people. What is the biggest challenge, issue facing education today, and what recommendations do you have for dealing with these challenges or issues? After that one, this is a good one. Jan, we'll start with you.
Personally, I feel like the greatest challenge is the number of challenges. It boggles my mind, you know, in Missouri, in November, they're going to vote whether teachers have tenure. And then in Kansas, as a little midnight fluke, now teachers don't have due process in Kansas. I think we need to, you know, we need to save public education. I think it's probably the overarching idea here. But again, the workload on teachers, the respect for the professions, you just see what I just comment on, the tenure issues, the salary issues. But there's, you know, the technology right now in our district. We're going to implement a MacBook, an iPad, just the numbers of technology, new grade book. That's another challenge. Instructional leadership. I think we need administrators to understand what it means to support teachers, and I think so. Administrative support, the testing issues, just the sheer number, the teachers packing guns, actually being brought up as a possibility. I just think it just boggles my mind, just the number of issues.
Cindy?
You know, we've already talked a lot about some of the issues. When we talked about why teachers are leaving the profession the first 3 years, and those are very real. I agree with Jan. Probably the biggest challenge is the number of challenges right now. I think Marguerite referred to it as a system cannot handle this many changes without something giving. So I'm going to take it a little bit different. I think one of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing is that we need to, I'm going to take it from a little bit different viewpoint, is we keep saying, how can we make our teachers better? And when we went to DC, we heard a lot about, well, you know, what are we doing to get rid of our bad teachers? And gosh, there's TV shows that are called Bad Teacher. There's movies that are like, you know, the I don't know, illegally appropriate teacher, I don't know. But there's all of these things that are being bombarded about teachers, bad teachers. I would like to shift that focus and say, okay, there's bad teachers because we are not having good administrators. And I think we need to really focus some of our attention on training good administrators. And not, you know, we need to not just look at education from the teaching standpoint, but also from the administrative standpoint. We train our administrators in a lot of things, facilities management, we train them in how budgets, but the greatest investment any district has is their human capital. And are we really training administrators how to help and train good teachers? How to take an average teacher to above average, how to take a struggling teacher to average teacher. Interventions, I think we need to spend a lot of our time of this conversation too focused on what are we doing to help our administrators. They're overworked. They are spending an inordinate amount of time on bus duty, lunch duty, when they should be in our classrooms. And it's not that they don't want to be, because they do. You ask an administrator why they get it, because they want to be a teacher leader. They want to be an instructional leader. But when you ask what they spend their day doing, they spend about 20% of their day actually doing that. And so I think that there's that challenge also is, we are losing some of our best administrators to retirement now. And we've got to really take a look at our not only our teacher training program, but also our administrative training program. And then the other aspect of that is, to me, technology. Technology could level the playing field in education. And there is simply the haves and the have-nots in education right now with technology. And you'll go to one school that it's technology immersed and it's beautiful, and you go to another and there's wires hanging from the ceiling, and there's kids that only have one laptop in the school. It is the one thing that we could do in investment is in our internal structure to handle the bandwidth that is needed for technology. We do not have the internal structures to handle that. And it could be the one thing that could level the playing field a little bit more across our educational system. Tie that in with all the other issues we've talked about, the testing, the accountability, the teacher effectiveness, the tying it to, there is just a lot we've talked about there.
Marguerite?
I think that the challenge is going to end up to be the solution. And so the challenge, I think, is that teachers have not, in the past, been schooled in their schools of education to advocate for themselves and for their students and for the educational process. I think that is going to change, especially with this new generation coming in. We're facing a tsunami of retirements, and we're going to have to fill these slots. And what we're going to do in this country is we're going to demand that we have people entering our schools of education who are brilliant. They're going to be the tops in their class. And we're going to make sure that they understand that their job is not simply to educate those students in their class. Their job, not that that's a simple job, I didn't mean it that way, their job is going to be to collaborate with their colleagues and their administrators. Administrators are on overload. I don't know any industry where the department head is in charge of the performance for as many as 60, 70, 80 people. And that's what we have with a single principal. How are they supposed to get in to see these in-depth classroom, to do these in-depth classrooms observation? And are they trained to provide supportive supervision for these people? It's a Herculean task. So what teachers are going to do is they're going to form collegial circles. They're going to become trained in how to help their colleagues do a better job, and that is going to make them better at their job. Every time that I observe someone else who's teaching on the same grade level, I'm humbled by that experience. I think about 3 things that they do better than I do, and I want to copy them. I want to imitate them. I think that we have to do this on a national level with something called the Teachers at the Table Act, which my Congresswoman McCarthy, wrote up about 7 years ago, actually. I went to see her when I was named New York State Teacher of the Year, and I told her the story of Santiago. And I was doing it's the best year of your life. 5th grade is gonna rock, you're gonna love it. I had them in the palm of my hand, and that child, Santiago, raised his hand. And he said, "Oh no, Mrs. Izzo, with all due respect, nothing good's coming after that sentence." 5th grade's going to be just like 4th grade. State test in November, state test in January, state test in March. I can see his face as he said, tests, tests, tests. When I told Congresswoman McCarthy that story, I didn't think it was going anywhere, and 3 days later I get a call from her chief of staff saying the Congresswoman thinks that this is the sleeping giant that we need to awaken in American education. We need to have teachers, such as yourself, testifying in Congress so that we can create the structures in which teachers take ownership of this profession. It's our greatest challenge, but it's going to be our greatest asset.
Gary?
I guess the greatest challenge that I see facing our education is a breakdown of the family unit, impacting our communities. There is a need for parents taking on that responsibility and the teacher to come alongside, but then community coming behind the teacher and empowering that teacher. It's what I see is just the interpersonal relationships and just the busyness of life. And we got to do this, and we got to do this, and we're quickly doing. And instead of reading to our child, we hand them an iPad, and they're sitting in the back seat. And instead of showing the importance of reading that book to that child, or sitting down and working with math facts, of going down the road and counting the cars. You count the cars by 5s, and I'll count them by 6s. And we're learning multiplication tables. Of seeing the importance of that, and it's almost like a parental, I see it as an abandonment, but it's basically because of the parents are so busy in life, and children almost become secondary, and the relationship just with others, and that relationship, that putting your hand on your child and telling them, you know, I'm really proud of you. And that relationship that comes between the community school and the teacher. When I first started teaching, one of the teachers, my colleagues, she said, you need to talk with the parents at parent-teachers conferences and tell them, I'll believe half of what that comes to school if you believe what half comes home from the child. And so just the negativity toward the educational system. In the news recently in our area, a teacher is caught doing something they shouldn't have been doing. But it doesn't show what the child did for the last 6 months. And the teacher did do something that shouldn't have. But that negativity toward what's happening, that's not happening all the time in all the classrooms. And recognizing what is happening that makes a difference. At Blissfield, we have a boy that is confined to a wheelchair, but it will not be put on the news that in our school we had a hat day last Friday, and this boy wants to ride a tricycle around his community, and it's not brought to the news that our 5th grades had this hat day to raise money. It cost $1,700 for his tricycle. The students that day raised $1,300 toward the bike, and the Rotary came and said, we're going to give you $500. And the bike was paid for in just one activity. And that type of thing of what makes a community of these kids learning to pour out to a classmate. Those things, the issue, the negativity, and the working to building that community is vital. My community doesn't look anything like Marguerite's or Jan's or Cindy's or Rebecca's. My community of Blissfield needs to be identified by that community school. And we need to continually support that recognition of that community. I don't want my kids to look like your kids, and you don't want your kids to look like mine. But there's an identity that our community needs to promote those personal relationships with people. And I think that there's an attack, there's a breaking down of the family unit, and also that leads to a breaking down of a community unit. And I think that's part of the educational system, is breaking down of a community.
Becky?
Well, I applaud my colleagues' sentiments and their statements, and I want to echo that those are huge challenges, and I agree with Marguerite that I think the teachers need to be part of that solution and be part of who creates those understandings with politicians and policymakers. So I think, boiling down, I think the biggest challenge in American education today is the attack on our public education system. From just, I just can't even imagine, what's happening, but just from everywhere. Before, you turn around and you get all these different things. So I'm going to focus back on, on me as a little girl, as a 3-year-old, who thought, I really want to be a teacher. I really want to be the best I can be and serve others. And if it wasn't for that public education that I received, I wouldn't be where I am today, here with these distinguished colleagues. That opened up so many doors for me, in education. And I wanted to quote, I pulled it out because I want to make sure I got the quote correct, but Dr. Hector P. Garcia, the late Dr. Garcia from Corpus Christi, was a presidential award winner, Medal of Freedom, and he said, education is our freedom, and freedom should be everyone's business. And I always think about that quote because it's so dear to my heart, thinking that if we truly believe in American democracy and our education system and what it can do for children, then why are we sleeping giants as teachers? Why are we sitting back and not being at the table? And the other part is that John Q. Public, people like me who have gone through the education system, aren't speaking out as well. And I think that lack of empowerment, that inability to come and voice that opinion in appropriate forums and places that we can truly say what we believe about our investment in our future, in our children's future. And we've had these discussions together as a team many, many times, and we talk about the lack of respect for teachers, the lack of professionalism, the lack of funding, the vouchers, the privatization, the defunding of American public education. I think that's our biggest challenge. I think that's our biggest weakness right now. So if we want to be global competitors in the world market, then we need to put our money where our mouth is. We want our kids to be competitive. We want them to be out there. I mean, my children, my grandchildren, and everyone else is here. We're going to be global competitors. We're going, with the internet, we are just working with China. We're working with, just South America, South Africa, everyone, we're there in an instant now. We need to think that way. So where does it begin? You can begin with me as a little 3-year-old in a poor neighborhood who had the opportunity for public education to be able to come back and contribute back in a service profession. And Cindy was talking about all the many different students that she has that are now globally impacting the world. And what more can we ask for? That's what we want, productive citizens who can do the best. And the best way is through public education. So we need to stand up for our system and fund it completely and support our teachers and allow the parents to have that voice as well.
We have a couple of questions here that you people have answered 14 different ways without me even asking. So I'm going to skip them and come down to the last two, and I'm saving the best question for last. But in light of Becky's response just now and what Cindy said, how should schools best manage the diverse group of students that we see today, especially those students who are limited or are non-English speakers? Cindy?
I kind of, Buhler, Kansas is not hugely diverse. And our diversity is a little bit different than some diversity. Ours is more, is not racial diversity as much as it is economic diversity. And what I'm seeing as I travel across the state of Kansas and other states too, is we have an inequity in our school system. And that inequity is really felt in poor districts. And that becomes, to me, something that the diversity of the students, as I see, really needs to be addressed. I think one way we can address it is through technology. A rural school has got to have access to technology to open up the same possibilities that a big inner city 6A, which is one of our higher classification school, has. The access to the AP courses, especially with math and science, the access to foreign languages. Those courses that are sometimes hard to fill because we have a shortage in those areas for teachers, we need that diversity through technology would be helpful. I see that us being able to use technology, I use the flipped classroom some, and what I have found is that's gotten used in a different way is I videotape most of my classes, and I've posted them onto this website that I have. And for kids who miss school because of mental health reasons, because of activities, because they're just sick. Or they have ELL, they're an ELL student, and they have to listen to it again. And they have to listen to it slow and pause and absorb. Because I talk fast when I go, and I can really get going. I have to have, like, people have a pause button for me sometimes. And that helps them. They can go back and replay it and say, okay, let me reabsorb, let me take notes, let me write down, let me look at my notes and listen to it again. And that technology has really helped some of my diverse issues. But the issue with that is accessibility to my lower level. I think that, to me, when I see diversity, I just think of the inequities that I see across our school system in all areas. Access to higher level curriculum, access to the best teachers, access to technology, and that's what I see separating. You know, we're losing our middle class, and in some ways I see us losing our middle class of schools too. It seems like we have a lot of haves and a lot of have-nots, and the middle of the road school systems are starting to fall apart.
Marguerite?
Cindy's points are really well taken. On Long Island, we have the same sort of situation. It's such a unique place because we'll have students showing up to school in their BMWs in one district, and then 2 roads down, you know, children are eating a bag of chips and drinking some kind of blue sugared water as their breakfast as they walk to class. And I think that technology is going to be the leveler. I think that's going to be a tremendous help. I do have a lot of racial diversity and ethnic diversity in my school, and I love it. It's not a challenge, it's a strength. And I'm just going to tell you about this one little girl, this Marinez. So she came to our school 3 years ago, and she didn't speak a word of English. Not a word, not a lick. I can't imagine what that would be like. You dropped in this foreign land, and you see all these other bright and happy faces around you, and you have no idea what they're talking about. And there's this authority figure, and you have no idea what she's talking about, but you're trying to please her the best you can. And Marinez is a people pleaser, and she smiled. She smiled a lot. But she's also a sponge. And she comes from a family of hard workers where they put their arms around her, and with every incremental gain that Marinez made in her language development, her parents would say, "I'm proud of you," in their language. When we have students who come from families where the television is not on all the time, or the children are not hooked into technology all the time, parents have a chance to interact in their language with their children. Those are the children that embrace the English language and make enormous growth within a few years. These children bring this work ethic to their studies, and it is so exciting to watch. As a school community, we embrace these families in our PTA meetings. We embrace them when we're talking about the Common Core implementation. We make sure that things are sent home, everything that's sent home is in different languages. In some schools in New York, that could be 32 languages. And that's a huge strain on a school district. And I understand that, but that's what this country is founded upon, valuing every child that comes through our doors. So I think, again, that is going to be our greatest strength, the diversity.
Gary?
In Blissfield, we've had a migrant program, and so Spanish is one of those areas. And we have a translator that is helping during that time period. And I think that's very important, of having someone who can translate in with that parent, with the child, but it's also the emphasis, helping them in learning the English language. One of the things that I've been doing is taking technology and being able to type it on the computer, and then it being translated into Spanish and sending home those letters to those parents. And it's just really encouraging that when they would come and pick their child up at the end of the day, you know, that Mr. Koppelman is using some Spanish as well, which I have very little ability, but at the same time of communicating with those parents in their language, but also encouraging them to learn the English language for them to be successful, not just here within the classroom or within the hallway, but when they go to the various grocery stores and that they're communicating with that language. And so it's important that we are helping those students with the various languages, and we provide the translation so that they learn English.
Becky?
Well, this topic is near and dear to my heart because all my 34 years of teaching, I worked with, English language learners in bilingual settings and saw the different ways that they needed to learn. But personally, I was one of those English language learners myself. So knowing that is really important because we know that the foundation at home in that oral language development, that vocabulary is crucial. So that's the message that we want schools to tell families of English language learners is whatever first language you do have, you need to continue it because you're providing very important vocabulary and concepts in that first language that are going to transfer to that second language. So in every country that I've worked with, I've gone to Russia, South Africa, Egypt, and China, working with teachers and working with families and students over there. Every single country that I've been to, and I know there's many more, embrace multiple language learning. So you go to Europe and your culture, you know multiple languages. But in the US, we try to diminish that and take that away, even though it's a sign of a learned person. So what we want to do is enhance that first language development at home so that the kids that step into the school then have language and vocabulary to think about once they start to acquire that second language, which is that English, and that English language development. So my children who stepped into school who were proficient in Spanish, or any language for that matter, and could understand the blue, or red, or number 5, or dog, had a conceptual understanding if you showed him a graphic organizer because he understood it in his native language. Because you don't really need to relearn it, you just need to relabel it. So once you start to develop that and use that as a tool instead of being a detriment, then you truly understand it. So that goes back to the question is, what should schools be doing to help these English language learners, this diverse population? One, professional development for teachers to help them understand what it is to acquire that second language and what are the strategies and scaffolds, those techniques and strategies that are very important, just like Cindy talked about earlier. Here are the standards, but here are the strategies. This is an instructional piece. We have that same second language acquisition piece that needs to be understood by all teachers because we're facing that, not just the ESL teachers, but all teachers, mainstream teachers need to face. That's one part. Second part is we need to educate our families and tell them, this is what's important for you to do at home. This is what you do. You can support them, just like Marguerite said. Wonderful, you're making progress, you're doing this, but at home, I'm still reading. I'm still providing a print-rich environment. And part 3 of that answer is that technology, like Cindy said, is the key. Because a lot of those families don't have access, so how do we do that? So my work as a senior curriculum advisor for abcmouse.com brings that to libraries, to community centers, to teachers, so that that vocabulary development continues to grow at that early level and continues all the way up so we become bilingual, bicultural adult learners that understand that and can transfer back and forth in those languages. So you think I speak English really quickly? You should hear my Spanish. It's really fast. So being able to do that and think is a really great creative talent. We know that in the research. So we want to develop, it's like learning a second language like music. Music has its own language of itself. So we want to foster that and create that. So that's one of the solutions that, that we want to create. And so above all that, there's a lot of now technology resources that are available, and I'm one of the English language learner cadre members from the American Federation of Teachers that has worked on the site colorincolorado.org, which is a wonderful website for families, administrators, and educators that allow them to understand what great practices are in English language learning. So there are a lot of assets out there to help us now.
Jan?
Well, I was surprised when we were in DC, and I agree with Cindy that economic inequality is a concern. I believe they said 1 out of 2 soon will be in poverty in this country. Think of all the implications that really brings to mind. Even in the affluent school district that I teach within, Johnson County, my juniors and seniors, the vast majorities have jobs. And think about, students have jobs, think about how that impacts their academic performance. They're tired, they're absent often. That's, I think, a real concern of mine. And then, do they get to go to college? What about their, the college level of learning? How that impacts their ability to complete college, I think, is another factor. Diversity, Shawnee Mission South always is in the top 100 high schools in the country. But one thing the faculty members have brought up to our administrative team is we've shifted to, we're in that top category primarily because we have the number of AP courses. So diversity, I think we're kind of forgetting students who are not going to be AP students. So that's another diversity issue. And finally, next fall, if I understand this correctly, the minorities will be the majority student. And so diversity, are we ready as a faculty for this diversity of our students? When I first started teaching at South High School, I applied for an Intel Award, and I had to take demographic statistics and kind of gather all that. And we had 1 to 2% minorities in our school. As of this year, it's 40%. How prepared are we really for the diversity of students that we're fast seeing, starting to impact those, that whom we teach? And my children, it's dear to me as well. My children we adopted from Colombia, South America. They're Hispanic. And, what are we doing for those students who don't see a Hispanic teacher day by day? My son, it meant a lot to him. It meant a lot to him that, it impacted him negatively not to see a Hispanic teacher in all his 12 years where he was attending school. So I do think there's a lot of issues that diversity is bringing to the forefront.
And now we'll go to in my mind, the best question. I'm going to read it from the sheet of paper, and then I'm going to rephrase it because it's not written right on the sheet of paper. It says, what factors have contributed to your success as a teacher? And after listening to you for the last hour plus, I'm going to rephrase it. Becky, what made you such a darn good teacher? That'll give you a chance to embarrass you.
Wow. And that's a hard part. It's hard for teachers to talk about themselves in that kind of light.
That's why I asked it
Yeah,
that
I
way.
know, it's a tough one. So I think that puts us on the spot, but I think I guess I'm gonna say it in a different way. I just felt that that calling was so important to me. And I just felt I was personally successful. I don't see my success as being something that somebody evaluated, but that intrinsic feeling that I got, that knowing that when I stepped into that room and I created that magic for those kids, and the kids responded with like magic of discovery, of exploration, of aha moments, of coming into the classroom and opening up a new world and taking that world home and exploring it even further. I think that's what made me the successful teacher for those kids and for myself, because that's the way I evaluated myself. And I think when we talk back about teacher evaluation, we are hardest on ourselves. So you put that pressure on yourself to be the best you can be. So every day I stepped into that classroom and I was the teacher. It was about, what am I going to do for these kids today? So one story is, I was doing a sink and float correlation, and I was reading the book. And as I finished the lesson, and I had correlated the book, and I was dropping pennies into the little boats, and the kids understood about cumulative type of weight, and the reason that weight accumulates and can press with volume down into water and so forth. And when they got the concept and I finished the book, these 4-year-olds spontaneously broke into applause. And I was like, oh, they got it. And I mean, they really got it. And then so when I asked the questions about, well, what does this mean? Who sank the boat? It was at the book set. And then they were like, and it wasn't like just the mouths, it was like all of them. And I'm like, they got it. And so that's what made me the success. I think knowing that kept me there over time, and we talk about, effects over time, that, I think, for career teachers is what keeps us there and keeps us being successful in our own minds. That this is the thing I'm doing it right. The second thing is, even though that I have left the classroom, I'm still working in classrooms, working with teachers and families and students with my role as a curriculum advisor. And so my second story, really brief, is that I was doing this presentation in Texas, and the families were all Spanish speakers, and they were coming into a computer lab, and this one dad comes in, and if you can just picture this, he's coming into the doors of this 20 computer lab, and you can almost hear the brakes going. He's like, he stops when he sees these computers. He's with this 4-year-old child. He was an older gentleman, and in Spanish, I said, come in, we're gonna learn about this. He goes, well, my wife sent me. I'm like, better reason, come on in, She obviously sent you, for a good reason with your child. And he says, well, no, I've never touched a computer before. And I'm like, well, we're gonna learn. We're gonna do this. So I went through my presentation, explained how what we were doing with ABC Mouse is gonna impact the child at home and how he could help at home. And so at the end, I always ask, well, what did you learn? What did you learn? And what did you learn? So forth. At the very end, he was kind of shy. I was surprised. He said, well, I learned 3 things. And I'm like, well? And he's like, 1, I learned that I can learn with my child. And I can learn English while she's learning it too. I was like, oh, it's great. I got goosebumps, right? Second one, he said, I learned and I realized that I'm never too old to learn. The tears were starting to, really work on me. I'm that kind of person. I'm very sentimental. And the third part was, he said, I understand that I can access this anywhere, and they have it at the library. I go to the library, they have free computers. So I want to know where I can get a library card. And I thought, wow, what an impact. So that's what keeps me still working with families and teachers, because we are making that difference. And we talk about all the influence that we have, and I look at the quotes around here, and to teach is to touch a life forever, and we never stop. And that's my view.
Cindy, either you're good, or you sure fooled the selection committee. What made you such a good teacher?
I look back on my career, and I think I was blessed with really good mentors. And administrators, and the administrators became my mentors, and really good colleagues. And I've always surrounded myself with people better than me. And it's ironic that I've been recognized because I'm not even really the best teacher on my department, let alone on my floor, let alone my building. But I've surrounded myself with people that are better than me and that are learners, and they encourage me to learn, and they're supportive. And I've surrounded myself with strong women, role models, and all of those combined, when I look at that, really help me realize that I have a passion for my content, and I have a compassion for students. And when you have passion for your content and compassion for your students, and you have this love of learning, that it's really became where I was in my true element. And I think that being in front of the classroom, I get to have all of those things combined. I would say that without my colleagues and without my mentors and without my administrators, I am not so sure I would be where I'm at today. And I look back, you always look back on your life and say, well, if I would have, stayed at this school, or if I would I be where I'm at today? And I think of all the people that played, from my first administrator, Dr. Watson, to my last administrator, my current superintendent, Mr. Berblinger, to Dana Richardson, who was one of the first female administrators I'd ever met. She was an assistant superintendent. I remember going to interview, and I thought, a female assistant superintendent, that was like in Kansas, in rural Kansas, that was a big deal. And she was, bold. And I just think about all of those people that played a role in my career, clear back to my high school math teacher, who showed me that, playing practical jokes and setting the whoopee cushion on other teachers when they sat down, and having a whole lot of fun teaching. I think all of those people and all of those combined experiences made me who I am today. And I would say the other part of that is my students. My students are world changers, and that's our vision of our school district, is to create generations of positive world changers. And I look, and I'm friends with my students on Facebook and texting, and this, this whole media society that we're in now, that they are truly positive world changers. I have these students who are, fighting human trafficking down in Florida. They have created a school in Africa that they've provided computers and online access for them. I have a student this year that it was his senior project to create clean water for the same village. I have students who are working in orphanages in Haiti who are donating their time for human rights for women across the world. I have somebody who is involved in the Happy documentary. I mean, I can just keep going. I mean, these are students that are changing the world, and they are what make me successful. I mean, they are the ones who continue to make me want to be better, inspire to be better. So I think all of those things, all those experiences, have really contributed to my success.
Gary, I taught in Michigan.
Mhm.
The reputation in that state is not the same today as it was when I was there 30 years ago. How do you do it?
I've had tremendous teachers in my life that I look up to as a role model. From my mom all the way through high school. I guess I was fortunate to have teachers that just poured into me. I have several learning disabilities, and with that, they encourage me that, yes, you can do this. It's going to look different, but Gary, you can do it. And when I got to Eastern Michigan University, the instruction and finding out some of the ways to overcome some of my learning disabilities, I'm so appreciative to the professors who helped me prepare for the classroom. Just professional relationships with master teachers that I work with on a day-to-day basis. I have learned so much from people that I work with, that ways to touch the child's learning palette. Being released by the Blissfield Community School to follow my passion with the Blissfield Foundation for Educational Excellence coming behind me and alongside of me and saying, we're going to raise funds for this Blissfield Environmental Life Lab. And they got on board, and my passions being released. The professional development that took place gave direction to some of my passions. And Stan and Trish Smith from Warrensburg, Missouri, a book called Animals in the Classroom, Beyond Observation. Those things that I learned from that book and workshops that were conducted to learning how to teach science in a total different way. There was those positive impacts that were made by individuals. And a key, I think, is that I haven't arrived yet. I'm still learning myself. And in order to be a successful teacher, I really believe you need to continue to learn, because that's going to be a key to help students learn the things that need to be learned. And they look at you as a learner and not someone that has it all together. And being honest, that when you don't have the answer, that let's find that answer together. And I really believe that there are people that have given me keys and have released me, and I am deeply appreciative of. I'm not like everybody else, and I approach the teaching profession in a different way. And I just really feel fortunate that in a small rural farming community, I'm touching the lives of students that are impacting the world. And that's really my success, is the students that have graduated from Blissfield and are going out and impacting various industries, not only agricultural, but the medical profession, the business profession. That's really what you need to look at as, if I'm a successful teacher, is those teachers or those students that have graduated and are successful in the areas in which they are now working.
Marguerite, the tear in the corner of his eye doesn't hurt anything. Does it? Jan, the other end of the state.
Yes.
What?
For me, I've always had a passion. I think you see a common denominator. Everybody has a passion for this, for teaching. I started teaching my dolls and my little sister. I'm sure she was really happy with that. But I was teaching at a very young age at home. I just always wanted to be a teacher. But there was two key individuals I think that made all the difference whether I stayed in teaching or pursued it. Because I think you could really, I'm a very emotional kind of person. I you know, like a little puppy dog, you pat me on the head and I can really, I have a lot of energy. My principal was huge. He supported me. He nominated me for my first award in 4 years. He was a tough principal. He had high standards, high expectations. The other one was my department chair, who ended up being my husband, but he was quite an example. He was very innovative. He was a science teacher as well. And you know, just his modeling was really very important and support. But beyond that, like many of you said, I was surrounded by I've been very blessed. I've had tremendous people who have supported me. We collaborate. That has been hugely important for me. But loving teaching, I mean, teaching, how could you not enjoy teaching if you teach science? It is so much fun every day. And to see the light go on in my students. They come in and nothing makes me happier than to see my students come in and there's an engaging kind of lesson and they just love it, they learn from it. And you know, then they come in the next day, what are we doing today? You know, that's really what keeps me going. I just love those daily lessons that really turn kids on to learning.
Marguerite, all the way to Long Island. What makes one successful there?
I like your accent. When parents come into my classroom for that Meet the Teacher night, I try to reassure them very, very early on in that Meet the Teacher speech that there are 3 tenets that I live by. And one is that I love the subjects that I teach. And you hear that repeated here. I am passionate about reading and writing. I am passionate about social studies. When people understand these stories that we read, they understand more about themselves. They understand their human condition better. When they understand the history of this country, they understand the shoulders that we're all standing on. I tell these parents that I'm passionate about this process, this art of teaching, of reaching each one of these 30 children, no matter how they come through that door. So I greet them at the door. This is our little routine, whether they're in 12th grade or 1st grade. They get to choose if it's going to be a hug or it's going to be a fist bump or we're going to shake hands. But we're going to have some kind of physical connection here. And we do that when they leave the classroom. That's sacred to me. I'm not sorting socks in Bloomingdale's or, no disrespect to my son, creating these engineering marvels that he does. I'm dealing with living and breathing children. So the third thing that I let them know is I'm passionate about the subject, I'm passionate about the art of teaching, and that I'm passionate about their individual child. I've often gotten, how do you say this, the children that are more challenging in my classroom, because probably I was one of those children, and I can relate really well to them. I want someone to engage me in whatever it is that I'm doing, and I don't suffer boredom well. I love those kids that are hard to reach. I'm crazy about them. When you make successful inroads with those children, you've changed a person's life. You've changed their family dynamic. It's enormously gratifying. I think we have to keep remembering what Cindy said, which is that we are not the best of the best. We are representative of all of our colleagues. And sometimes you know, I wake up in the middle of the night and I think, you know, why did you put me here? And I think it's to lend a voice to our colleagues. So it's not my way to have these kind of conversations about what I'm successful about, because last Thursday I might not have been successful with a certain student, and that keeps me up at night. It's to promote this passion for education so that our best and our brightest go into it. You know, I think about, and I want to paraphrase that quote that's been all over Facebook that Maya Angelou, I believe, penned, which is, people will forget the facts that you taught them, but they will never, ever forget the way you made them feel about themselves. So as a teacher, you have this incredible power. You can create the weather in that room by the way that you address a child. And that's a sacred trust. I've been blessed, as we all have, to have incredibly supportive administrators and very honest relationships with those administrators. And I'm very, very, very grateful for all of them. But I'm even more grateful when I go around the back of this display and I see those cardboard letters, the construction paper letters that my students have written to me. That's what makes me get up and want to do a better job tomorrow. I'm reading this book about that, TED Talks, and why people, by the millions, by the billions, tune into these TED Talks. It's because people are talking about what they're passionate about. So I hope that your son stays in teaching if that's what he's really passionate about. And I hope that every educator that goes into our profession understands that this is a sacred trust that we've been endowed with. And every day you have to do better than the day before.
I served on the selection committee for the National Teachers Hall of Fame for several years before I went on the Board of Trustees. And I can guarantee you this year's selection committee did not err. Did not err. And if I inferred at all that these are the 5 best teachers in the United States, I was wrong. These are representative of hundreds of thousands or even millions of excellent teachers. They are among the best, but there are many, many excellent teachers. I thank the 5 of you. I congratulate the 5 of you. And I look forward to another year of successful teaching for all of you except Becky, who is now doing more and better things than teaching.
No.
But that we will have another class next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.